Following a ruling by the European Court of Justice, the ECJ, on the so-called rule of law mechanism, Hungary and Poland are threatened with cuts in billions in payments from the EU budget. The judges in Luxembourg on Wednesday dismissed lawsuits against the instrument from both countries. This increases the pressure on Ursula von der Leyen's responsible EU Commission to act quickly against both countries. The German federal government welcomed the final verdict, while Budapest and Warsaw criticized it as an attack on freedom and accused the EU of abusing its power. Both countries receive billions from the EU budget every year. For years, however, critics have accused them of subjugating the judiciary and influencing the judiciary contrary to EU standards. For this reason, the EU had also acquired an instrument intended to punish violations of the principles of the rule of law if this threatens to misuse EU money in a country. This involves principles such as the independence of the judiciary and the prosecution of criminal offenses. The regulation on rule of law conditionality has been in force since 2021. However, Poland and Hungary wrongly saw themselves as the focus of the new instrument from the start and complained to the ECJ. The EU Commission wanted to wait until the verdict before triggering the mechanism. It's also part of a 2020 deal by leaders that saw governments in Budapest and Warsaw end their deadlocks on key EU budget decisions. The ECJ rejected Poland's and Hungary's arguments that the EU was exceeding its competence. The judges explained that the aim of the regulation was not to punish breaches of the rule of law, but rather to protect the EU budget, which could be jeopardized by any breaches. They also emphasized that the EU is based on the trust of the member states to respect common values. So, the EU must also be able to defend these values. With regard to the community budget, the ECJ makes it clear that this is one of the most important instruments of solidarity between the EU states. In addition, the regulation provides for a strict procedure in which the countries concerned have several opportunities to comment. In the circumstances, the court dismisses the claims of Hungary and Poland in their entirety. Now it would actually be the EU Commission's turn. Their task is to initiate procedures under the mechanism and ultimately to propose cutting the money for certain countries. Above all, the European Parliament puts the authority under pressure. The Social Democratic MEP Katharina Barley said that the EU Commission could no longer duck. And according to Daniel Freund from the Greens, the Leyen judgment takes the last excuse there. And the liberal politician Moritz Körner, hi Moritz by the way, warned, the rule of law in Europe is on fire. With every day that they don't use the mechanism, von der Leyen makes herself complicit. The EU Parliament had already sued the EU Commission before the ECJ because it wanted to wait until the verdict before taking any further steps. And after the verdict, the German Minister of Justice Marco Buschmann is also urging the EU Commission to act. It has the opportunity to take effective action against violations of the rule of law that endanger the budget and the protection of financial EU interest. I am firmly convinced that she must also do this, said Buschmann to the German press agency. And von der Leyen herself, the conservative politician, repeatedly acted as a determined defender of the rule of law. However, the expectation of quick penalties against Hungary, Poland or other countries were dampened in the reaction. Her authority will first thoroughly analyze the reasoning behind the judgment and the possible effects. In the coming weeks, the guidelines for the application of the mechanism will then be decided. The governments in Budapest and Warsaw, with whom the EU Commission has been arguing for years about minority rights, judicial reforms and allegations of corruption, reacted angrily to the verdict. Well, of course. The decision is living proof of how Brussels abuses its power, Hungarian Justice Minister Judith Varga wrote on Twitter. Yeah, the populists again. Her Polish colleague spoke of an attempt to deprive EU countries of their freedom. No, it's not your money. However, the mechanism is not yet in use, especially since at least 15 of the 27 EU countries, which together make up at least 65% of the total population, would have to agree to a reduction in funds. Political considerations could also speak against rapid action. Warsaw recently sent signals of relaxation to Brussels, and in Hungary, parliamentary elections are due in early April. Should the EU Commission take action against the right-wing government beforehand, this could be understood as interference in the election campaign and used by the populist Prime Minister Viktor Orban to his own advantage. So I have a certain understanding there for von der Leyen at the moment. But even if it takes a while before the rule of law mechanism is applied, the EU Commission still has another means of exerting pressure on Hungary and Poland. So far, the authority has not released billions from the Corona Aid Fund for both countries due to constitutional concerns. Migration, pandemics, climate change, investments. At a joint summit, the European Union and the African Union want to intensify their cooperations. The heads of state and government of the 27 EU countries and around 40 African countries were expected at a two-day meeting in Brussels. The expectations of both sides sometimes differ widely. However, a special EU meeting on Ukraine and the question of whether and how France will continue its military operation in Mali could overshadow the summit. The neighboring continent of Africa, with its 55 countries and around 1.3 billion inhabitants, is of great strategic importance for the EU. Political instability, terror, and the sometimes poor economic situation in parts of the continent mean that many people in the EU are looking for a better life in the EU instead of Africa. At the same time, aging Europe is dependent on skilled workers from the young African population. Countries like Russia, China, and Turkey are trying to gain influence on the continent through huge infrastructure investments, arms sales, and defense cooperation. The EU therefore makes cooperation with Africa one of its priorities. Large parts of the continent were brutally colonized by some EU countries well into the 20th century. Today, the EU is trying to treat African countries as equals. A number of EU initiatives deal with Africa and emphasize the close cooperation, for example in digitization, the transition to a climate-neutral economy, or the expansion of energy networks. At the same time, the EU is pushing for better cooperation in the fight against unwanted migration and is also willing to use the issuing of visas or trade relations as a means of pressure. The aim of the summit is to adopt a joint declaration. From the EU's point of view, the main focus of the meeting should be the extensive investments with which Europe wants to secure influence in Africa in competition with China and other countries. EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen announced last week that the EU would mobilize more than 150 billion euros for this purpose. The focus should be on digitization, education, and the transport sector. For many African countries, the current investments come at the right time. The economy has been idle for almost 2 years due to the corona pandemic, public coffers are empty, and unemployment is high. The fight against COVID-19 has been the main cause of disputes between the EU and the AU in recent months. For one thing, Africa got the impression that Europe was hoarding vaccines. In fact, just under 12% of the population in Africa is vaccinated, while in the EU it is more than 70%. There is also resentment because Europe is refusing to release the vaccine patents. The EU, on the other hand, repeatedly emphasizes how generous it is. So far, 148 million doses of vaccine have been donated to Africa, it said. By summer 2022, the number should rise to 450 million. At the summit, a concrete commitment could now be made for further 29 million doses, of which 21 million could come from Germany alone, according to government circles. The summit could also be overshadowed by the situation in West African Mali and the Ukraine crisis, as I said. On Wednesday evening, France and its international partners discussed whether the fight against terrorism in Mali should be continued. There is growing skepticism about maintaining the commitment in Mali. It was said before a meeting of European and African decision makers from Élysée circles. The decision should be announced soon. It wasn't there when I started filming this, but it should be there when you see this. Before the EU-AU meeting, the heads of state and government of the EU states also want to hold a special meeting on the Ukraine crisis. The Africa summit had been postponed by more than a year because of the pandemic. The EU and the AU last met for a summit in 2017. The topics have not really changed since then, but the focus for the AU is now on how to deal with the corona pandemic. Even then, both sides assured each other that they wanted to intensify their cooperation. With mobile production facilities, the Mainz-based company Biontech wants to advance the production of corona vaccines in Africa. It presented the modules for such systems in Marburg in Hesse in Germany. The corona vaccine from Biontech and Pfizer is already being produced on a large scale in Marburg. According to Biontech, the plan is to deliver the production facilities to Rwanda, Senegal, and possibly South Africa, in close coordination with the respective country and the African Union. The first system is scheduled to arrive in Africa in the second half of the year. Production is expected to start 12 months after delivery to the destination. According to Biontech, partners in Ghana and South Africa could support production with filling and packaging capacities. Present at the presentation of the modules in Marburg were, among others, the presidents of Rwanda, Ghana and Senegal, Paul Kagame, Nana Akufo-Addo and Macky Sall. The Director General of the World Health Organization, the WHO, Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus, and the Federal Development Minister Svenja Schulze. She's from my hometown, by the way. In a statement, Akufo-Addo spoke of a meaningful day for Mother Africa. Independent vaccine production should be achieved to meet further national, regional and continental health security needs. According to the announcement, EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen called the Biontech initiative a real pioneer in our global fight against the pandemic. WHO Director General Tedros welcomed Biontech's initiative to increase vaccine production in Africa and to complement the WHO hub for mRNA technology transfer. From my point of view here, southern neighboring countries of Austria and Switzerland are throwing most of the protective measures overboard in view of the falling corona numbers. Switzerland is already largely returning to normal this Thursday, and in Austria most of the restrictions should be lifted by March 5th. In both countries, only the mask requirement should continue to apply in some areas for the time being. However, Austria is sticking to the compulsory vaccination that has come into force. We have not yet overcome the pandemic, warned Austrian Chancellor Karl Nehammer in Vienna. In view of the stable situation in the clinics, however, the opening steps are possible. The Swiss also pointed out that the health system was unlikely to be overloaded despite the continued high virus circulation. We hope that this will be the definitive exit from the crisis, said Health Minister Alain Berset. In Switzerland, both vaccinated and unvaccinated people can now go to restaurants, shops, cultural institutions and leisure facilities again without a mask and corona ID. There are also no longer any restriction on private meetings, and the recommendation to work from home has been lifted. Only on buses and trains and in health facilities will masks remain compulsory for the time being. In retirement and nursing homes, however, only the staff and visitors have to wear a mask, not the residents. There are no longer any requirements for those entering the country. Proof of vaccination, recovery or a negative test is not required. In Austria, events are possible again without restrictions from March 5th. The curfew should fall and gastronomic offers should be allowed again at night. Health Minister Wolfgang Mückstein said the 3G rule should apply again instead of the 2G rule in gastronomy at events in cable cars and in sports facilities from February 19th. Entry will be made significantly easier from February 22nd with the 3G rule for those who have been vaccinated, who have recovered and who have been tested. A worthy spring awakening from an entrenched crisis mode, as they put it, is now possible. The FFP2 mask requirement only applies to buses and trains, in shops for daily needs, clinics and retirement homes. Only in Vienna are there stricter rules for the time being. The 2G rule in gastronomy will continue to apply after February 19th. Night gastronomy will also only open with access controls based on the 2G or even 2G plus principle, said Mayor Michael Ludwig. When shopping in the Austrian capital after March 5th, there will also be an FFP2 mask requirement outside of the trade in essential goods. Mückstein warned that the situation could worsen again in the fall. Therefore, the summer must be used for vaccination. In principle, the obligation to vaccinate is not up for discussion. A possible suspension of the penalties is being discussed. The rate of those with basic protection, which usually requires 2 injections, is currently 70%. In Switzerland, it was just under 69%. In both neighboring countries, the number of infections is significantly higher than here in Germany, for example. In Austria, the 7-day incidence was around 2,500 new infections per 100,000 inhabitants. In Germany, it was around 1,400. In Switzerland, only the 14-day incidence is recorded, which was given as a good 4,450 on Wednesday. And I'll see you in my next video. Bis gleich.